Coming up, it's another edition of The Real World. Where are they now? Nathaniel Blackburn from The Real World Season Seattle. It's Season 7. Make sure you subscribe as I'll be adding more videos like this, but Nathaniel has a lot to talk about during his time in Seattle, including the slap heard round the world. Let's get to the episode right now. Hello and welcome to another edition of Here's the Pitch. It's sponsored by Masses Restaurants in St. Louis. There's 5 locations. STLmasses.com is their website. If you're driving through, watching in St. Louis, go check them out. 5 locations. Good menu, good pasta. And today I'm very excited. We're going to be talking to folks from the real world and reality television and see what they're up to. And I'm lucky and happy to talk to Nathaniel Blackburn today. And Nathaniel, we talked right off the start. Everyone knew you as Nathan. You're now Nathaniel. We'll get into that, but good to see you. Where are you living? Tell people what you're up to right now. I know truthnorthretreats.org is something we're definitely going to talk a lot about, but just tell us where you're living, what you've been up to.
Yeah, man. First of all, Brad, thanks for having me on the show, man. I love what you're doing and love the content that you're putting out there. I currently live in Dallas, Texas. Got married a few years ago. Ended up getting sober some years ago. Life after the real world kicked my butt in a lot of ways. It was really good in a lot of ways as well. My wife and I are expecting twins in a couple months, and I founded a men's ministry a few years ago called True North Retreats.
What do you do there? What do you do? Just tell us about it.
Yeah, man. So along the way, the real world was such a unbelievable experience and opportunity for me as a young man. And, what I didn't understand as a young man was that I had a lot of trauma from childhood, hence why I was probably chosen for the real world, because I had this, kind of sensational story going on at that time. And, when I left the real world, I got into film and television for a number of years and had some really great opportunities. Well, what was going on with that was I had access to a lot of cool things and a lot of parties and a lot of opportunity that ended up really kicking my butt. And drinking and stuff took me down some really dark paths for a really long time. And I ended up getting sober out of desperation. Because I was going to take my life if I didn't try to get sober. And when I got sober, faith entered my story. And in that process, my relationship with God, it was shown to me that, why I drank and why I found security in the party and in the party scene. And it was just because I had a ton of undealt with trauma in my life. And so I started walking through that trauma and unpacking some of that stuff and how it affected me as an adult man. And it changed my life. It changed my life immensely. It changed my life into confidence and who I am. And so much so that I really felt encouraged and drawn into creating a place for other men to investigate their story and get closer to God while doing some pretty fun stuff as it relates to shooting guns and throwing tomahawks and eating steaks. And what True North really is it's a place for men to learn that vulnerability is not weakness, but it's strength. And we do that by luring guys into, hey, let's go on this killer ranch and we'll go fishing and shoot guns and eat some steaks and hang out by the fire and we'll have 7 hours of silence with God and processing. That's kind of the bottom tagline. And we started that in 2019 and just blessed to be doing that today and being overflowing with men that are actually wanting to come out and experience what we're doing.
I'm definitely going to dig into it more, but I we have to kind of go backwards to get to where we got there, because that's a lot to unpack. So tell me about just the experience of auditioning and just becoming a real world cast member? Where did you see that this was happening? Of course, you and David, famously went in together. They come and pick you. I'm guessing that was staged, but tell me all about the just the knowing about the show and wanting to be on it, and your audition and where you went and all that stuff. How did you know about it? Because you guys were season 7. This happened in 1998. Did you even know you were going to Seattle? Give me all of the things that went into kind of going for the audition.
Sure. So late 90s, for those that remember, not a ton of internet stuff going on. And the Real World was, man, the thing that was happening, and people wanted to be on and be around. And, in 97, David and we were at school together and we were friends. And David and I actually lived in Europe together for a semester abroad in 1997. When we were in Europe, we happened upon the filming of Les Miserables with Liam Neeson and Claire Danes. And this was Claire Danes post Romeo and Juliet, and so they weren't huge actors yet, but when we met them, they sorry, I'm fucking blocking here. Yeah. We actually met them, and they said, "Oh, you're English speaking," and we were like, "Oh, you guys are too. What are you doing?" And they're like, "Oh, we're filming this movie," and I'd never seen a Hollywood production before, and it was magnificent. I mean, it was unbelievable. And in 97, in the Czech Republic in Prague, if you were over the age of 18, you didn't speak anything other than Czechoslovakian. So finding other English-speaking people in 97 was a big deal. So we hit it off with the crew from this movie, and they let us watch them shoot their final scene in the evening. Well, we watched Claire Danes shoot this scene, and we were kind of starstruck, and we were like, "Hey, we're going to this bar if you guys want to join us." And they were like, "English-speaking people, we're in." And so we went out that night and had drinks with Liam and Claire, and just was just an unbelievable experience. So much so that when I left that experience, my plan when I came back to the States was, man, how do I get into the field of entertainment? And I'm a small town Virginia guy. My first plane flight ever was when we went to Europe, and so I just figured I had no way to break into that scene. When we get back to the States, and we're in our senior year at VMI, and I get home from class one day, and there's a flyer. A flyer, for those who don't know, is something that's put on a piece of paper and is handed out. And that's how you communicated events and different things back in the day. And there was a flyer on my desk that said MTV would be in Richmond, Virginia, accepting live auditions for season 7 of The Real World. I'm like, dude, I've got a crazy story. This has got to be my chance in. I'm going to go apply. So I snuck off campus because you're not allowed to leave VMI without, written permission, military school. And I went to Richmond, Virginia, and showed up in person. And my first interview, I went up to the casting director. It was at a bar, weird. And I sat down with 2 shots of Patron Silver and 2 Budweisers. Said, I'm Nathan Blackburn, and I'm going to be on the next season of The Real World. They were like, "Oh, excuse me, you are." And we had an unbelievable time together in that first interview. So much so that, the next day I get a phone call at VMI, which, again, we didn't have cell phones. And so there was a note on my desk when I got back to my room in barracks, and it said, "MTV has requested to see you again." And so I called the number that they gave me, and they said, "Hey, can you come back down to Richmond for a second interview? You've made it past round 1. I never knew David auditioned. I don't know, and he doesn't know that I'm auditioning at all this time. So I go back to this second interview back in Richmond, and it's in a hotel room this time with a different director, and it's all these things are documented and filmed. And it was probably a 2-hour interview that was very intrusive, right? I mean, they were really wanting to know the story. And then that was it. And so they're like, "We'll be in touch." And man, a few weeks, maybe a month goes by, and I end up getting another call while at VMI. And they said, "Hey, would you be willing to set up a video camera and do a phone interview with us for round 3? Of course, yes. And so you actually set up a video camera and you're recording while they're talking to you, and then you send them the tape. And I did that maybe 2 other times. We're talking 5 probably 5 interviews at this point, to where you get a phone call that says, hey, you've made it to the finals, and if you're open, we'd love to fly you and my girlfriend at the time, Stephanie. They had gotten to know her as a result of my interviews, out to Los Angeles to meet with everybody. This is probably 4 months process at this point. And so when we got out there to LA and went to Bunim and Murray Productions in Ventura, which I'd never been to LA. I mean, I was starstruck as is. We got out there, and during that interview with Stephanie sitting next to me, they brought up David. And I was like, David? Of all, and I really had no idea. And so, we found out maybe 3 weeks later that we both made the show. We thought that David was going to go on Road Rules because they auditioned and cast for Real World and Road Rules simultaneously. And so of those 30, they were going to take whatever it is, 15 people, half the people would make it. And Stephanie, my girlfriend, was somehow thrown into the mix as castmates and was going to come on the show with me. And David was going to do Road Rules. And in hindsight, we found out later that David made Real World because he was secretly having an affair with Kira, the casting director, who is the first person I sat down with at the bar and had the shots of Patron and beers with. And the only reason she brought me back, she said, was because my last name was Blackburn. And at the time she lived on Blackburn Avenue in California. So, man, long story to get around how we got there. And I will tell you this, that back then they did a masterful job of casting. It was a rooms full of professionals and therapists and counselors and psychologists that were really looking at, they start out with over 100,000 videotapes and in-person interviews and stuff. And to whittle it down to a handful of folks that don't need anything other than to live together was pretty masterful in how they did it. Now, we were one of the last seasons that I think people would say this probably unanimously around the country that people could relate to, and that were, for a lack of better terms, real. Nothing on our season was set up. They didn't give us things to say. Nothing was manufactured. They didn't have to. They just picked the perfect people to be together to watch the chaos.
Yeah, it's seemingly all people who want to be actors now. That's a great story, and I read about all your cast before this because I wanted just to see where people might be, and I read this thing from Irene where she wrote all of the things that went on in her audition, and then the time she was there, and she obviously didn't have a good time there, but then they sort of flipped it on her, and they used the Lyme disease thing as sort of the reason why she was leaving and flipping out. She got kind of mad about that. So I guess there's some people that just, don't like the edit. There's always the edit. But it's amazing because she did say, and the things that kind of hit me, it was like, well, the first line of the show is 7 strangers, and you were not strangers with David, which was interesting. That's true. Yeah. And there wasn't a reality show on still. You guys were the only, up till about Survivor and American Idol. I mean, This was the only reality show, even though it had been on 6 different seasons. So there still wasn't this playbook. I mean, you could watch Miami and you could watch Boston, obviously. But I just think that was interesting that as I think back, you guys still were kind of in that early stages. I mean, it was the infantile stages of reality TV. So there's a lot of questions right there. I guess, what was it like when you got in there, or just tell me about just being picked, and then was it that day when you see the camera showing up at VMI? I would assume by then right? Was that stage, and tell me about just now making that move.
Yeah. So we found out during Christmas break, and so we knew mid-December that we were going on the show. And so they wanted to have a send-off at BMI. And so, they worked it out with the school. The reveal was personal. And it was a phone call that you got, and then they said, hey, we want to actually show VMI through the casting process, and we'll meet you guys there at the beginning of the semester, and it's not staged, but hey, we want to get some content. And VMI did a parade of like kind of sending us off, and this pretty big deal. So that part was phenomenal. I had no idea we were going to Seattle until probably a week before you were going. And so I didn't know what Seattle was. I remember getting on AOL and like typing in Seattle and the Emerald City and, kind of checking things out. We were still the only reality game in town. And it was a big deal, but I don't think we knew how big of a deal it was until we got off the show. To this day, Seattle was the second highest rated season viewer wise ever. And that, how to really equate that to context. So episode 1 airs and I'm on a family vacation in Bermuda, an island off the coast of, America. Right. And the first episode airs, and the next day in Bermuda on the beach, 7 or 8 people were like, dude, you're the guy from. And so that was the first time where I was like, oh, my life might be about to change. It aired in 97 countries, which is insane.
How did you not watch? How did you not have like a watch party? I mean, you would think this, all right, we're going to get behind the TV and watch.
Because like this vacation happened and I was trying, like, I had cheated on Stephanie, right. and I didn't know if that was going to be aired. She cheated on me. Like it was like, hey, I need to really focus on my relationship. Here's what they used to do. They would send you in the mail a VHS copy of the show 8 days before it aired. And they did that to prep you so that it wasn't some big reveal. And so, I mean, I still got the VHS tapes. And so I knew what the episode was, and we did a private watch party before we went on this vacation. It was just such a different time. Like, I am so grateful that social media did not exist back then, because, I mean, I would have gotten in trouble, like a lot of trouble probably.
What? It's crazy. I was just in my head doing the math. It's basically 23 years ago is when this thing aired. It's been 23 years now. I was 23 when I watched it. That's what I was in my head. I'm like, all right, wait a minute. So that's crazy. Let's go. Do you talk to any of these folks at all? I mean, again, 23 years is a long time. Yeah. So anybody, do you keep in contact with any of them?
Yeah, I'm sorry. Contact them. I didn't mean to cut you off, Brad. Yes, the answer is yes. At first, a lot. What I found is I wanted to be serious about trying to get into the film business, and I thought the Real World would be a platform to that. Little did I know that it would be almost an inhibitor to that because of the notoriety that came with your face. I can remember early on in auditions for CBS and for films and stuff, they would say, man, you did a really great job, buddy, but we can't cast you because people know you as Nathan. And it would be hard for the viewer to disassociate with that. So I got really serious about acting and went to Sandy Meisner Movement Studio in New York City and went to Second City in Chicago and these different things to try to get me in there. And I say that because MTV was calling all the time. Hey, we got this thing. Hey, we got this thing. Hey, we got this thing. And my management, my agents were saying, dude, the more you do that, the harder this is going to be for you. And so that's why you see me do a couple of those challenges early on and then disappear from that. And so I started to just separate myself from this group of reality folks that really was incestuous at the time. Of people lived together and they lived on a certain block in Santa Monica, and I mean it was just this thing, and so that kind of started this wide chasm for me away from all that stuff that really continued into my drinking and kind of the darkness. I mean, I ended up homeless twice kind of in that process, but recently I have reconnected with Irene in a really good way. she and I have been able to connect and talk about, the trauma that resulted for her and, the resentment and stuff that she had towards, how they did do some of that editing. And I took some responsibility around, man, I kind of turned my back on her when she left too, because to me, I didn't want to rock the boat. This was my ticket to getting into things. And man, as I've grown up in a lot of ways as a man, I just wanted her to know that. And so we've become, friendly again. She's got a baby and expecting her second baby right now. And, I lost contact with David, over the years, and we just recently reconnected. So MTV's has been trying to track everybody down, and there's this phenomenon around the reunion homecoming stuff. And we were on par to do that. And so they asked me to reach out and try to connect some of these cast members, and I did. Not everybody, and some of the cast members, I won't say, refused to communicate, and we won't be doing that homecoming show as a result of that. I've contact with the Miz from time to time, and Theo from Chicago, and I just had coffee about 2 months ago. He lives right outside of Dallas, and there's a handful of folks that I'll be in contact with, but we've just all kind of gone in different directions. There's a pool of them that love that identity, and they stay there, and I think you know who those are. And that's not me.
No, and it's interesting because, again, I've contacted others for this series, and I will tell you they've turned me down, and had wonderful conversations with people with the same thing, that they've been contacted for a homecoming. And I really thought of this before that, so I'm kind of angry that this is becoming. But they say the same thing. They say, listen, that was then. I'm sort of, that was 30 years ago, 20, whatever years ago. So I get it, and I totally understand it. But that's why I appreciate that you're doing this, because I think I really do. I want to know what you're up to. My wife actually said she saw you on Instagram. She's like, you should try the guy from Seattle. I think he would do it. So no, I guess, when you look back, are you happy you did that? Are you happy that was part of your life? And it's 6 months, right? It's so small. It's like, a semester of college, but it's amazing that, again, I remember you. I went back and watched some of these episodes, and it was fun to go back and think about where I was in life. How do you think about when you look back? Happy you did it?
Oh, 100%. I mean,
do it again? Do it again? Would you do?
Yeah, of course. Of course. I mean, here's the thing. In hindsight, I was trying to rally my cast to do it, because I think there's such a good story within some of us around restoration and redemption, and for Irene in particular, it was like, hey, this is a chance for you to tell your side of the story. If we're going to do this thing together, and also to show people, that Lyme disease is real, and how you've lived with it. And I think because of the nostalgia of those earlier seasons of the real world, man, like, people are connected to us, and not from an egocentric point of view, but like, it brings you back to where you were 23 years ago and what was going on. And so anytime I get asked to do this stuff, I'm in, only because, like, I went dark for a long time as a result of my drinking, and I was embarrassed and I was shameful about it. And I can tell you, in 2009, after the fall of the economy and stuff, man, I was addicted to cocaine again, and I was waiting tables at a restaurant, and I was 145 pounds, and people would still recognize me, from the show. And it was like I was living in this shame tape of hiding behind, what I was to what I had become. And man, by the grace of God, that has changed immensely because of who he is and what he's done in my life. And I'm not trying to be any kind of pastoral, preachy, none of that. I don't ever want to be that. But I do want to share that truth that has truly set me free, and on a different trajectory, because I think all too often people hide behind the fear of judgment and the name that comes and the stigma that comes along with being an alcoholic or being a drug addict. And so for me, if it's an opportunity to share that there's hope out there in that with people, I will. When I go back and do it again, yeah, because it was part of my story. It helped speed up the process for me to eventually have a fall that would bring me to my knees in literal ways and also in emotional ways to truly reach out and ask for help, so that I could eventually come out the other side. Not to mention, man, I got to do some unbelievable cool stuff, like, hanging out with Method Man and Wu-Tang Clan, and those are like idols of mine, and flying jets and traveling the world. I mean, it was amazing.
I guess I just never can grasp the cameras in my face all the time. How quickly do you get used to that, when in your situation at least?
Sure. Man, like in a day, because you've already gone through a 4 to 6 month process of being interviewed in front of the cameras, which are right there, right? Well, as you start to film, the cameras aren't right there. Like what was so great about it is you're wearing mics that I think had like a 2 mile range or something ridiculous on it. The cameras would be down the hall, and so you kind of know they're there. And I will say the benefit to having David with me was, the first couple days were hard because you're so aware of the cameras and you're so aware of not wanting to look like a douche, or like, are my boys back home just going to ride me if I'm some total different guy? And so Dave and I made a pact on the way out, like, hey, if we're not showing up authentic, man, we got to be able to tell the other person and then receive it, and so we had that conversation like 3 days in of just like, man, we got to be ourselves. We're not being ourselves. Let's just like ignore the cameras and just let go. And I think, as evidenced by the show that we did that, we definitely let go.
I was going to say, it sounds like you're happy with your edit, even though you're the first scene, you and Stephanie leaving, and then the next scene you're on the phone, and that's going to be your storyline. You have to craft a storyline, but that was it, huh? Tell me about, everyone will mention that season is the one. Every season gets remembered for something, right? Season 3 is the Pedro Zamora story. So you guys are known for the Irene and Steven slap heard around the world. And you said you talked to Irene, and I read about her and kind of just her seeing it. What was it like being in the house? And what was it like then finally seeing it on TV? Because, you didn't see it live. You heard about it. You heard about, what they told you. I don't know. Did they show it to you? Tell me a little bit about that. Did they come in and show you what happened to get your reactions? I can't remember if that did happen. And then your thoughts after you saw it. And then it sounds like now, again, 23 years later, you're good with Irene. And not sure how you are with Steven, but go ahead and just give me some thoughts on that.
Yeah, we were in the kitchen area by the pool table when she took off and had her final word to Steven, and she was brilliant in how she knew to incite him, and he just takes off out the front door, and that's all we see. And then pandemonium ensues, and we see, production crew kind of just flying everywhere down the pier to where the cars were, and I kind of can remember just going out like, what's going on, and they escorted Steven away. They never let him come back, which is smart on their part, because it would not have been probably good physically in that way. And so they just said, hey, Irene, Steven's hit Irene, and y'all need to stay right here right now. We're trying to figure things out. And, later that day, they sat us down and said, hey, we want to show you guys what happened, and we're going to leave it up to you on what, the response will be for Steven. And I think they set us up for that one. Because one of the things I took responsibility for with Irene recently was that, man, I'm sorry I let him come back. Because the slap seems so insignificant in the way it's shown to us in the edit, which, a slap's a slap, right? And I think, again, you're under this illusion around your future is really in the hands of, especially me, who wanted to get in the entertainment world, and being an insecure young man, I did not know what I was saying, and they sold it to us on this. Hey, if he stays, it's going to be anger management and, give him a chance again. And we're going to try to get Irene back. And, and so that for me is kind of a no brainer because I don't have to step into some conflict or choose a moral high ground, right? Because I was just so kind of insecure on that. So, that part I had to apologize, man, to Irene for because he should have never come back in that house. The reality is that from our season, the reality television contracts were written. Everything started having drug usage. They pulled David and I aside probably a month in and just said, hey, we can't show you guys getting high, but we know you're getting high. And so we legally can't record you guys. Well, for me and David, it was like, oh, so we can smoke pot and you can't show that. Yahtzee, and so we were off to the races, like we learned that we could turn our mics off and they couldn't track us. Like they had to write rules and stipulations for physical contact, for drug usage, for evading and disappearing. Like I turned my mic off and went to Vancouver for 3 days. Like it was that stuff never made it on air. But yeah, the way it was handled, back then, they screwed up. If that had happened in today's day and age, man, we'd be having hashtag movements going on as a result. So, and I think Irene feels really hurt or felt really hurt by that and not supported. And she wasn't. I mean, they didn't do anything for Irene. And so I can see where that would make her really, frustrated and bitter, which she was for years. I mean, she did a stand-up comedy routine around the country, lighting MTV up,
It's great because I'm having all these thoughts as you're telling me this because I'm a former TV producer and try to think of myself as a freelance TV producer. I still want to do stuff like that. But I think about the situation that those producers were in because, again, this is still pretty new, season 8. I mean, early on, they created this whole basically platform and way these shows are put together. You watch, like my wife watches The Housewives. And you know that these women know they're going on to fight. The producers, tell them what this person said. And the fact that these people at Boonham, I can never remember if that's Boonham or Bunham Murray, had the foresight to just sort of know what would make, quote, reality TV. Oh, it's going to be people, but we're going to manipulate the situations. We're going to kind of try to, and then you guys knowing how to get out of it. It's all so interesting to me that just even back then, there was all these thoughts going around just kind of how do we, what do we show? How do we get to make fights? How do we get things that look like good television? I think it's so interesting as we talk because, again, in 1998, people have to remember this was the only reality show. You guys were actually real people. As you see, this wasn't actors coming in and trying to get their first start. So it's so interesting to me. So I appreciate that. So we talked about kind of that time after you did some stuff you did some challenges. You talked to the Miz still because I saw you're on the Gauntlet with the Miz. Your Gauntlet season was pretty great names. I mean, some of the great seasons, and it was early on. I think it was 02 or 03. So you got Coral and Miz, and then Norm from season 1. And you still chat with the Miz, huh? Is that on and like an ongoing thing?
No, I mean here or there. Norm. I mean, I just talked to Norm the other day. Norm and I are still really fairly close, and John Brennan, from LA, the cowboy, the Jesus cowboy, our buds, and CT, and some of those guys. But the challenges, I did the first one actually ever, which was the Real World Road Rules All-Stars. And that's where we had the tour bus. And then the losing team had to drive around in this Winnebago from the 60s called the Shitty Winnie, where we went to like Hugh Hefner's house and the Playboy Man, all that stuff. And the Gauntlet was the last thing I ever did on air. Before the Gauntlet, I was on Guiding Light for a while, soap opera, and I toured the country with Willie Nelson, the Dixie Chicks, as the Grandmaster of Ceremonies for them, and did a bunch of commercials, movies, all those kind of things. And then the cocaine was really kicking my butt, and MTV kept calling and calling. I kept declining, and then the other offers stopped coming in as a result of my drinking, and kind of word was getting out that, you know, Nathan is kind of not to be trusted. He doesn't show up to meetings, and which was totally opposite of who I was. And so I needed money, and I needed something, and I finally called MTV back, and that's what the Gauntlet was. And, you know, if you see me on that show, it's the beginning of the end for me. I mean, I was up smoking crack cocaine for 2 days before day one of that show. And so I showed up there not having slept for 2 days. The funny part of that is I kicked their asses. Okay. We're talking, you know, so that I'll hang my hat on that. It's still good. Made it to the end. We lost because Coral's a liar. I don't want to bring up old stuff with that one. We should have never voted off Theo. Theo should have been there. Coral did not get bit by a spider. You just couldn't run up the mountain, period. Theo was on that one. He doesn't let us. White Theo, who's now like an unbelievable comedian, he's doing his next Netflix deal. He was on there, and he never let us live that down. But that was my last MTV deal, and I made an ass of myself during that filming. I will tell you that the rap party, I was on mushrooms. And sorry if this is a podcast for free range, right?
Hey, we're real world, real life talking here.
Yeah, it was nuts. It was just the beginning of really my downfall into addiction. The next 10 years of my life were multiple DUIs and just no money and just bad stuff. But I always think back to the Gauntlet, because that was seeing myself on TV looking like that, how different I was, kind of opened the door to me starting to go, man, maybe there's a problem. And that's what led me to move to Colorado. We shot the Gauntlet in Telluride, and that was my first experience in Colorado. And my brother was living in Denver at the time. And when the bottom fell out in California right after shooting the Gauntlet, he came out and said, hey, man, let's just get you out of LA. And I was like, yeah, let's get me out of LA. Colorado's great. And that's what would eventually lead me to Texas and to God and to recovery.
Yeah, I mean, so I was just curious. I mean, do you look back and wonder, well, why was I addicted, or is it a sickness in your head and you just? I mean, are there thoughts that come through? Because from what I can tell, it looks like you had your third. I'm going to read you your rap sheet here if you don't mind. But you had your third DUI somewhere in 2013, 2014. And then after that, it seems like that's when sort of things kind of clicked and you met some folks in Colorado. But I mean, it's so funny we're talking about this. My interview I did 1 year ago was with a guy named Scott Spezio, former baseball player, and he battled addiction up until 2.5 years ago, and now he's in his mid-50s, and he's finally clean, and he was just at the ballpark last night at Busch Stadium. But I'm always curious when I talk to folks about this, because I am curious, and I like to learn and maybe help. You never know who's watching, and maybe they can be helped. Yeah. What do you think back on what was going on? Was it because of your childhood? Did you just enjoy it? What do you, or is it, hey, it's a sickness, and it's a very incredible sickness, hard to fix and hard to heal?
Sure. Well, I'm going to tell you this. The answer is yes to all of it, right? And so I believe that I was predisposed to having the disease of alcoholism and addiction. And it is a disease recognized by the medical community that has nothing to do with alcohol and drugs. So that medical community really dropped the ball in how they named it. Alcohol and drugs become a solution to a mental issue that's going on inside. And it's really, for me, it was really sneaky on how it came because, man, I enjoyed it. I was good at it. I had a great time. Like what happened, if I'm really honest, the insecurity I had as a child was born out of the environment, but also was just kind of in me, I think, because I work with guys in recovery today who their childhood looked way different than mine, yet they still had that same insecurity, right? And so what I can remember is when I had my first alcohol experience at 14, 15 years old, I got drunk while camping with my buddy and his family on Miller Genuine Draft. And I can remember it as the most peaceful sense of ease and comfort come over me from the drinking, which I think everybody feels when you drink. You get a little buzz, right? But what's different is that this deep-seated, message-driven insecurity that was in me was gone. And confidence, comes up, and it just gave me a new light, And then as high school wears on, I start drinking, and I get more confident around girls. And what's really going on was that this self-berating messaging of, man, they don't like you or whatever it is, it just gets quieted down and goes away, and you forget you even had it, and then take this guy from small town Virginia who's really good at drinking, probably drinks a little too much with his buddies, and now let's go ahead and put him on MTV, and let's give him access to the world, and let's feed his false sense of security and ego with fame. Well, I forget real quickly that I have all this stuff in my past that I've never dealt with, that is eventually going to come out, right? And so when does that stuff come out? Well, when the drinking and the drugs stop working, you then start to abuse the drinking and the drugs, because what you're trying to do is you're trying to recapture that feeling and that confidence, because slowly but surely these things are starting to bubble up of the trauma and the wounds and all these different things that will eventually come to the surface. And so for me, the disease of it was, man, I enjoyed it, and me enjoying it helped me keep perpetuating the lie that I had a problem, and early on it was, man, Nathaniel, dude, like your drinking's kind of out of hand. Oh, no, it's not. I'm on MTV. This is what normal people would do. And then it was, the first person who ever said, hey, I think you might have a problem was Matt Kunitz, who was the director of our season of The Real World, who later went on to do Fear Factor and Wipeout and all that stuff. And he pulled me aside a month into filming Seattle and goes, hey, do you know that you become a completely different person when you drink? And I'm like, oh, who doesn't? I'm 21. I'm on The Real World, And so it was a lie that just kept going and going and going. And it's one of these diseases that has nothing to do with alcohol, has nothing to do with drugs. And if you're not homeless, living under a bridge, or selling your body for drugs, then you're probably not a drug addict, right? Wrong. Like, that's the lie. And so when I was introduced into recovery, I remember sitting in my first 12-step meeting, and it was a bunch of heroin addicts. And I was like, what's wrong with these people? I can't believe they're shooting heroin. I was like, man, I love cocaine, and things getting a little out of hand, and I smoke some crack, like your bar is here. And then slowly but surely what you become is the thing that you were judging. Like all those people who were homeless and addicted to heroin and all that. Well, where do you think I ended up 10 years later? 10 years later, my bar kept getting lowered and lowered and lowered, only because I was unwilling to admit that I had a problem. Because society really circles the wagons in a lot of ways around judgment of that. So, very long answer. I'm sorry, man. I could talk to you about this for a really long time.
Well, I think it's interesting what you just said, because I was listening to you, and that's interesting because I mean, I've had drinks, I've had too many. Always thought, I'm okay. But it is interesting when you said and I think this is what you said, you look at someone else at an AA meeting and you're like, oh, they're worse than me. All I'm doing is this. But then you keep getting to that next point where now you are them. And that's crazy. And that's an interesting thought that I would never think of, but an interesting way of putting it, because you probably do go in there going, oh, they're way worse than me. I'm just doing a little cocaine. They're on heroin. Well, then, yeah, so it's very interesting. I didn't know if you had more to say on this, so but I just wanted to mention that. I thought that was really interesting.
Yeah, I think for me is that there's less of a percentage of people that have alcoholism and addiction that are ready to admit it because they're not homeless, because they're not living under a bridge. I guarantee if you were to cast the net around your circle of people, 3 or 4 people in there are struggling right now. And you don't even know that they're struggling right now because people are so ashamed to ask for help. And there's not enough information out there to help people connect the dots that, man, you don't have to have a broken past to be an alcoholic. You don't have to be homeless to be an alcoholic. If you're taking something outside to fix an internal condition, you might have a problem. Man, that could be food, it could be gambling, it could be money, it could be women. Drugs and alcohol are just under this microscope because it's killing people, right? And so I just think there's so many people out there that are struggling with addiction that they're just unwilling to ask for help. And I think there needs to be more focus on people that are recovered saying, hey, man, here's the lies I lived under, and I'm not ashamed of it anymore, and I want to be honest about it. And so if I'm given an opportunity to come on here, I'm not trying to share my story in a way to give me glory by any means, but and here's the deal. If I stop doing what I'm doing today, meaning I sponsor a handful of guys and help them where they're at, like coming off the street or waking up to the fact they have a problem. And what I'm doing is I'm walking them through the recovery process as it was shown to me. And what happens is this beautiful thing that I'm reminded of not too long ago, who I was when I was dependent upon drugs and alcohol and dependent upon myself, and so any chance I can get to talk about it, what it really does, I'm being helpful, but it helps me in a lot of ways, because if I were to stop sponsoring guys, if I were to stop seeking my relationship with God and trying to be of service, man, I really believe that I would convince myself that, man, dude, Nate, like, you've been sober for years and weed's like legal and you loved weed and man, you're a pretty high strung guy, and like you're about to have kids, like it'd probably be good maybe to get a prescription to some pot again to just kind of mellow you out. That sounds insane to me today. But I can't tell you how many times a conversation like that happened with myself when I was trying to get sober. And I would believe that delusional thought and I would relapse. And that, I mean, hopefully that little bit of a story would help family members kind of understand why do our kids, why are they relapsing? Why does my husband continue to relapse? Doesn't he understand the pain that he's causing and the hurt that he's causing? Like, families are baffled when guys relapse. And what I can tell you on the other side of it is going like, sometimes those guys are choosing that over you. But more times than not, they are in this mental illness and this obsession and this cycle that's going on with the way their brain works, that you're not in the equation, and it's not purposeful towards you. It's that they are under the delusion that this mental illness is twisting people's brains around.
Yeah, well, it's a great story, and I'm glad you're here to tell it. How many days sober for you? You said kids, right? Are you married? How many kids? And one more time, just tell us how you kind of came about with TrueNorthRetreats.org, which is what we're kind of wrapping up with here. Just those three questions in one right there. Look at me do this interview thing.
You're a great host.
Oh, thanks.
Yes. Yeah, you're welcome. Man, I've been sober for 6.5 years. It took me 10 years to get sober, so been around it for 16.5 years, 6.5 years sober, married, expecting twins in a couple months. And True North Retreats was born in 2019, and we have got retreats booked through the end of the year, and we're already booking out for 2022. If anybody wants to go to the website or shoot me a message or inquiry on the website, we'd love to talk to you about joining one of our retreats or answering questions. We have not marketed ourselves in any way, shape, or form because we're fearful that we don't have the capacity to meet the need. As people start to hear about what we're doing, we've got a waiting list of guys that want to go out and spend some time with God and some fellowship. And Brad, we'll have to maybe get you, come on down.
Never know.
Make a little trip, man, and have
anything to get out of the house, and I'm okay. Yeah, put me on the list.
What about you? Married, kids?
I'm married. I have a stepson that's 13, and we're we're going to try to make our own child over here as well. But I've been married 3 years now, very happily, very very excited. And again, my wife told me, she's like, Nathan from Real World. You should try him. She always gives me these ideas, and I'm like, he won't do it. But I'm glad that this is how we work. We're a team over here.
Yeah, that's great, man. What your stepson's name?
It's Ethan.
And your wife's name?
Catherine. I'm trying to give this out over the, but they're out there on Instagram, so
they're all right.
That's fine.
Yeah.
I always finish with anything. Did we miss anything? Anything else you want to talk about, or did we? I think we got to everything. I had so much fun. I could probably go on and on about the real world, so there might be a part 2 at some point with you, but we've gone long enough. Is there anything though that we need to wrap up with that I may have missed, or you want to make sure people know?
No, man, I just appreciate what you're doing. And again, from the bottom of my heart, man, thanks for being a fan and remembering and extending the invitation to come and be a part of your show, man. I anytime you need that or want to follow up, or if there's anything I can do to be helpful to you, just let me know.
I'm going to do that. You're going to hear from me after I'm going to tell my audience something, but stay right there. That's Nathaniel Blackburn. I really appreciate his time here. And again, thanks for watching Here's the Pitch. It's sponsored by Masses Restaurants, 5 locations, stlmasses.com. Don't forget to subscribe as well, and we'll see you next time.